is meeting virtually. The meeting is being streamed live on the Port's YouTube channel. I also want to acknowledge that it's Veterans Day today and to thank veterans and their families for the sacrifices they've made on behalf of our country. On to business of the commission. I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of October 14th, 2020.
Yes, I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you lead us through a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander.
Present.
Kuprokomis.
Aye.
Lamb.
Aye.
Levy. Commissioner Levy, are you on mute? Commissioner McDonald. Nemi. O'Halloran.
Aye.
Pierce. And Saruda.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bob Levy's an aye.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Curtis, would you please give us your executive director's report, please?
I would. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, guests. Very nice to virtually have everyone connected today. I also would like to recognize our veterans at the Port and also here on the call. Happy Veterans Day. We had a really great town hall meeting yesterday where we had a couple visitors talking with us about their experience in the armed forces. And as I think everyone on the call knows, the Port is full of veterans from all branches of the forces, and we are really made richer by their presence. And so just really grateful to recognize folks today. I would like to acknowledge the Port's monthly safety champions, whose photos are now on the presentation screen. You'll see folks from, they were on the screen, folks from all parts of the Port. There we go. And again, these are just Port employees who are really doing their best to watch out for each other, stay safe, really go the extra mile to show leadership around safety issues. So this morning, I'd like to ask Stan Waters to give us a safety message. Stan, are you with us?
I am. I was on mute. Sorry about that.
Sure. Thank you.
My message today is that the Port will be working on validating and verification of our COVID workplace procedures over the next 30 days. We have already completed a gap analysis of the current state of our COVID workplace procedures versus the draft Oregon Occupational Safety and Health temporary COVID rule. On Friday, November 6th, Oregon OSHA adopted and published a revised temporary rule to address COVID-19 workplace risks. The Port sees this rulemaking as an opportunity to validate and verify our current workplace COVID safety processes. The completed gap analysis revealed that the Port was well aligned with the draft rule already. The rule as adopted provides additional COVID workplace guidance that will assist our essential workforce to safely accomplish their jobs. Getting our businesses fully aligned with or exceeding this new regulation will be our priority through the balance of November. Thankfully, we have been on the forefront with our COVID workplace safety processes, and meeting compliance will not be that difficult. With recent case counts mounting throughout the Port service area, all community members should reflect on their COVID prevention behaviors. Normalization of previously exercised COVID prevention measures can occur over time. Please know that our Port businesses are continuing to learn and adapt from Oregon Health Authority guidance, Oregon OSHA rulemaking, and demonstrated best practices to fight the normalization and keep our employees, contractors, and community healthy. Curtis, that's my safety message today.
Terrific. Thank you, Stan. I know everyone is aware that we are just entering the cold, dark time, and it just is going to call on all of us to be a little more careful and a little more safe about how we engage and go about our day-to-day business. So thanks for the update, Stan. I, for one, know that I'm glad the election is over. From the Port's perspective, we're certainly glad to see the record number of voters who came out to express their voice this election season. We're grateful for the record-setting numbers across the country, just people wanting to be engaged and to have a voice in their future. As you might expect, 2021 will now bring a real opportunity for us to acquaint several new elected leaders from the state and local level with the port and what we do, from Portland City Council to Gresham, Troutdale, Washington County. We're just really looking forward to engaging with a lot of new partners throughout the region and getting them up to speed on what we do. We're also looking forward to working with the Biden administration on the priority issues of restoring confidence in travel in the context of a COVID environment. Additionally, hoping for direct support for airports and advancing, finally, a comprehensive infrastructure package that I know we've talked with you about many times in the past. On to business updates. We were very excited a couple of weeks ago. Lightbox, De Beers' own company that produces laboratory-grown diamond jewelry, officially opened its $94 million manufacturing facility at our Gresham Vista Business Park on October 29th. Manufacturing started this summer as construction was being completed on the 60,000 square foot building, and they'll continue to ramp up production through the rest of the year. It's just a really exciting addition to Gresham and the port's property portfolio, now part of Lightbox. Once fully operational, the facility will be producing approximately 200,000 carats of lab-grown diamonds annually. Really exciting stuff. Internally, and I guess recognition-wise, the port was again selected as the winner of the Portland Business Journal's Healthiest Employers Award for companies with between 500 and 1,500 employees. We were recognized for our holistic approach to wellness, from cooking demonstrations to mental health support to the launch of a new employee-driven wellness committee. Really exciting news. Congratulations to our team on that front. And finally, last month, we heard testimony from community members here in the commission meeting who were concerned over potential issues around a lease with Skyward Verizon at the Marcom site. I'm sure you'll all remember. We also held a virtual public forum, I believe the week after, where we heard overwhelmingly that the nearby community doesn't feel comfortable with this use at this site. And for these reasons, we've decided not to move forward with further lease discussions with Skyward. So at this time, there are no other current or planned uses contemplated at the site. Just wanted to keep you informed on that topic, commissioners. And with that, Madam President, I'm concluding my remarks.
Thank you, Curtis. I appreciate the port and port staff's engagement with community and community listening moments. I'll call for motion and second for approval of the executive director's report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Pam, would you lead us through the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Alexander,
Aye.
Kuprokomis,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Pierce,
Aye.
and Saruda. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. We did not receive public comments this month, so we will move on to our general discussion agenda, and I'll call on Dan Pippinger to introduce the first two general discussion items.
Good morning, Commission. Thank you very much, and happy Veterans Day to all, especially those retired Coast Guard members out there. Today, you're going to hear updates from two of the port's advisory committees, the Citizens Noise Advisory Committee and the PDX Community Advisory Committee. These standing committees are part of our broader community engagement program at the port, and both advisory committees are related to the airport, but they're distinct from one another in both membership and their charge. The Citizens Noise Advisory Committee specifically deals with aircraft noise at PDX, which is not a small issue as it relates to operating an airport in an urban environment. The PDX Community Advisory Committee is an advisory body specifically focused on the planning and development of PDX and the airport plan district. And so there's a great diversity of issues addressed there to support a sustainable approach to airport development. Leadership from both committees are with us today to share a bit about their work over the past year. We'll start with Kelly Sweeney and Mike Finch from the Citizens Noise Advisory Committee, and then we'll transition to Jeff Owen to provide a report of the Community Advisory Committee. Kelly and Mike.
Hello, is Kelly there?
Might
Can you
just
hear
be
me?
you, Mike.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I'm Mike Finch. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Citizens Noise Advisory Committee, here to provide our annual report. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right now, this is our membership of the Citizens Noise Advisory Committee. We do have a couple of changes. Dave Stenstrom is ending his term. Doug Kanaga has moved out of the area, and then we got notice that Tina Penman has also moved out of the area. So those positions are open, and we're searching for new members. Next slide, please. Formed in 1998, successor of the 1984 Noise Abatement Advisory Committee. And I'll apologize for reading these off. This is supposed to be a shared presentation. We are the official public forum, liaising with the port and the public. You saw the list of 15 representatives. We're advisory in nature. We have no regulatory power whatsoever, but our goal is to limit noise impacts and again, respect the community environment, health, and quality of life. Basically the go-between between the port and the public. And we also assist community outreach and public involvement. And as you know, this has been an odd year, so that's been curtailed quite a bit in 2020. Next slide, please. Here's our mission statement, and I'll read this. CNAC seeks to limit and reduce the impact of aircraft noise related to Portland International Airport in consideration of and respect for the community's environment, health, and quality of life. CNAC also seeks to raise the community's understanding of aviation noise through education, outreach, and advocacy. And next slide, please. So here's what we're doing currently. We're trying to recruit those new members from the missing. We'll see in a couple of slides down that the annual complaint count is down. Talk about the use of satellite-based procedures, particularly GPS-based navigation, which we call RNAV, which is, I'd say that's synonymous with GPS, RNAV, standing for area navigation. When we talk about next gen or next generation, we're also talking about incorporating that GPS technology and flight management systems in the aircraft to enhance navigation for arrivals, departures, and en route segments. The next gen was started about 11 years ago, and it's gradually being adopted by the airlines to now where most of the approaches are available with the RNAV capability. And what's coming out now is called Required Navigation Performance, which is an enhanced RNAV or GPS technology. It's the same as before, except now we have more controls and checks and cross checks. So it's a bit more accurate, and their backup systems and so forth. Ongoing adjustment of outreach messages. Again, we've been sharply curtailed in 2020 due to the COVID. Keeping up on the aircraft technology. Again, events were canceled this year due to the COVID-19. We normally have a Starbase program with the Air National Guard, whereby STEM students, science, technology, I think engineering and math programs get taken over to the guard base and shown that area.
Hey,
And
Mike,
then-
I'm here. Apologize for my
Oh,
tardiness.
see how you are.
Set
Okay.
the captain up.
Okay, and we do collaborate with the Oregon Air National Guard, and one of their members, and I'm not sure his position, it seems to change, but a high-level Air National Guard member is generally at our meetings to discuss our procedures and the effects of noise. Next slide, please. Okay, this is where I was supposed to take over.
Oops.
Okay, here we have a 2019 picture of where the complaints come from, and the blue spots mark the noise monitors. The one that's in Vancouver, immediately north of PDX, has been decommissioned. They're doing a lot of construction there, and at some point they'll decide where to replace that monitor. Next slide, please. Okay, talking about the RNAV slash GPS procedures. The picture on the left is the arrival paths, and I'm not sure the time frame, but these are the old radar vectors when people were when aircraft were using land-based navigation, and then they would be turned by air traffic control and then onto the final approach course for landing at PDX. The picture on the upper right is using the RNAV arrivals, meaning the GPS-based arrivals. And then once they get close to the airport, they're broken off and then radar vectored onto the final approach course. And you can see how diverse those paths are. And then the lower right is the RNAV arrival followed by the RNP approach, which is, again, the enhanced RNAV or GPS approach. And you can see how tight all those arrivals are. So one of the problems we have with the next gen is it's quieter. The aircraft on the lower right, they're in a consistent descent, constant rate of descent, so they don't have the power out. They're higher at any point in the approach, but all the path is over one concentrated area. So if you happen to live under that path, it's going to be quieter, but you're going to get all the traffic. Next slide, please.
And Mike, if I might add one thing, back to that last slide, one thing that we have noticed is coming from the West Hills as they're just about to make the turn to base, there have been an increased number of complaints right under that flight path. So as Mike noted, if you happen to be under that concentrated area, you're going to notice a difference. And we have been receiving some complaints in the last year or so out of the norm because of the tightness of that flight path.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, and this is the evolution of airplane noise. The top one is a 737-100. We call it a turbojet, whereas most of the thrust is coming from the internal core of the engine. It makes a lot of noise. It moves a little bit of air really, really fast. It makes a lot of noise. And then as we progress down to the bottom of the list, we have actually more efficient engines, and they move a greater amount of air at a lower speed, and therefore they're much quieter. Next slide, please.
And I think this was back to me, Mike.
Yep.
So because of the COVID environment, everything's different this year, as we all know, and so the community outreach that the noise office would normally do is just not happened this year. Fortunately, the reduction in aircraft flights has helped us a little bit, but this outreach that the port affords the noise office to do has been instrumental in changing the path of some of the complaints. So just to being out there in the community, a lot of the bike Portland environments and other community events, mostly Jerry Gershbach from the office is handling, and Chris Blair, as you can see in the photos. But this makes a real difference in terms of just being out in the community and let people come in and asking questions. Next slide, please. The other thing that the office budgets is they attend mostly through Jason Schwartz, is the noise symposium that's handled every year. And it moves a little bit around, mostly in the southeast part of the United States. But they afford 2 CNAC members to attend. And this is, you know, in my 12 years of being on the committee, I've done it once. It's one of the most impactful events we get to attend. And Portland, both PDX and the noise committee are identified as leaders in how to do things right with the general community around an airport. But we get to listen to the Chicagos and the Washington DCs and the Atlantas, and there's a great group out of Truckee that is always there. And so we get to learn a lot as a noise exposing entity for the public, and then the noise department itself learns a lot at the symposium. So again, thanks to the port for affording us to be able to go. Next slide, please. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, this is 2017. We don't have the earlier data up, but the complaints were up in 2017. This is when the Air Guard was proposing a new arrival procedure called the Overhead Constant Descent Approach. And what they proposed to do was do similar to the RNP. Of course, they don't have the RNP in their aircraft, but it was a similar concept, in fact, where they would do a constant descent higher up and at lower power settings. They were proposing to add numbers of aircraft to the flights that arrived, and also the number of runways that they'd be able to do this procedure. So the committee voted to approve a trial period, and prior to that trial period, we notified the public, and then right after that, and before the trial started, we started getting complaints. So anyway, that's the reason for the number of complaints up. It's interesting to note that the actual complaint count here, 1511, and the number of individuals, 241. What we find in our bi-monthly reports is generally 50% of the complaints are generated by 3 people, the top 3 people. So we look at the total number of complaints, and then we also look at the complaints subtracting those 3 people. Not that we discount those complaints, it's just that it gives us a better perspective on the complaints that we're getting. Next slide, please. Fewer complaints here. And you can see along the West Hills, there's complaints. A lot of the complaints come from the Cully neighborhood, and then out in the Gresham area, as especially in the summertime, as aircraft are vectored in lower to do their approach to the 28s landing to the west. Next slide, please. Complaints up again a little bit. Actually, complaints down a little bit, but the number of individuals is up. And next slide, please. This is what we have through 2020 so far. Number of individuals is down slightly. Complaint count is down a lot. Again, you see the cluster in the south of the airport. I think this is mainly due to the Guard doing their approaches to the south, and also to the cargo feeders, which use that north-south runway. And then, of course, we've had a great reduction in the number of flights due to the COVID, so I think that accounts for the reduction in complaints. Next slide, please.
as Mike was just talking about, the number of complaints are down, but some of those complaints have been around local law enforcement and their aircraft circling some of the demonstrations that have been going on. And we've got to tip our hat to the Portland Police Department. The people that lead the group have been very responsive in terms of talking to consumers or neighborhoods or whomever below some of the flight paths, between the news helicopters and other aircraft flying around the area. You can imagine that the complaints in certain areas have been growing, and so the Portland Police Department has been very helpful. As with the orang is always our number one complaint, and the Guard historically has been very helpful in terms of adjusting their departure and approaches. They only do the overhead approach when the FAA allows it to happen, and the adjustments when there are itinerant incoming Guard or other Air Force units coming in. They're very good about working with those commanders at the other bases to let them know we do have noise abatement procedures, and please follow the path, because we're developing a good relationship with the neighbors around the airport. We want to keep that up. Other things that we're looking ahead to next year is to continue, as Mike has talked about, the Fly Quiet program, the next gen procedures, and working with the FAA to tighten those up. And as depicted on the right is a poster that Mike has been spearheading due to his aviation experience in helping local pilots as they go into the pilot lounges and the various airlines that serve Portland, to let them know that we do have this procedure, and we very much appreciate their following the procedures and why they're flying the way they fly, or why the FAA is asking them to be vectored in certain areas, to fly high and come in, not low and slow and drag it in. So again, this has not been bought off yet by the FAA, but we're certainly working with them via the noise office and Mike Finch's work here to help us get these things into the pilot lounges. What uncharacteristically for me, we try to listen more than we talk. That's one of our biggest missions. And the one thing that we have found, especially through this COVID environment, because more people are home, that the noise office is publishing noise alerts has been instrumental via Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and direct email to various organizations, that the flights, especially at night, there's some anomaly. It's been very beneficial in making sure the neighborhoods are aware of what's going on. And then we continue to work on strategies to grow our footprint, if you will, and enhance the work that we're doing. We can go to the next slide, please. Before I end this, apologies for my tardiness. My timing was off this morning, but I first want to thank the port and the commission for your guys' work and effort to help us afford to be able to do this work that the Noise Committee does. If it wasn't for the work that Phil Stenstrom, Jerry Gershbach, Chris Blair, and Jason Swartz do, we would not be able to be as beneficial to the neighborhood as we have been. So the one thing I want to make sure and say before we end here is this is a volunteer group. And like all volunteers, there are certain people that have hung in there, but I want to acknowledge at least 3 people on our team here. Mike Yee, who's been a volunteer in the Noise Committee for 16 years. Joe Smith, who's been a volunteer for 14 years. And Karen Mayer, who's been on the committee for 11 years. So overall, we have about 90 years of volunteer service and an average of about 7.5 years. And the work that my cohort here, Mike, has done has been instrumental, because he gets to sit in the pointy end of the airplane. He's been immensely helpful. We have a noise audiologist on the team. We have, right or wrong, several lawyers. And we have a great relationship with the communities that we continue to serve. And our job is to do, as the mission said, to both represent and to educate. So that's what we're going to continue to do this next year, and are continuing to work with the Oregon Air National Guard, the Portland Police Bureau. Interestingly enough, one of those entities that I personally follow is the little thing called Nextdoor. It's one of the first indicators I get if there's something going on in neighborhoods, that because I live 1,000 yards south of the airport. I'm privy to all the neighborhoods that surround the airport on the Oregon side. And so it's been fun, and I forward a lot of those informational dialogues back and forth between the port and the noise office and us as representatives of the people. And I'm thankful that both Multnomah County, that Joe represents, the city of Portland that I represent, Gresham and Troutdale that Mark Clark represents. Again, I think we've got a good representation, especially both in the Portland area and the Southwest Washington area that Mike Yee and a couple others on the team represent. But at the end of the day, it's all volunteers, and I think we've got a really good group of people that help the port get the message out and us get the message back to the port. So with that, do we have any questions?
Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Finch, thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate your time, both coming to commission today as well as on the committee. We appreciate as well all of the community members who volunteered for many years doing this important work on behalf of the citizens of the community. Want to make sure we've gotten any questions from the commission answered, so I'll turn to that.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
I just want to appreciate your volunteer work on this very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly and Mike. And Mike, great job pinch hitting there.
Thanks.
Shot across the bow.
There'll be some beer involved, I'm sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is going to cost me dearly.
Thank you both very much. And we'll go ahead and transition over to Jeff Owen to give an update on the PDX Citizens Advisory Committee. Jeff?
Excellent. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Jeff Owen, Chair of the CAC. I've been involved now in the CAC for a couple of years and have really enjoyed the role that port staff play and hearing from community partners all around the table. I'm also the multimodal representative on the group, and my day job is strategic planning at TriMet. Next slide, please. So the role of the committee is, the quick reminder that we grew out of the 2008 to 2011 Airport Futures process. Together as a group, we represent about 30 people total, 20 people who are active voting members, plus 10 ex officio. We represent regional interest and by state. So with the city of Vancouver, as you see the logos on the slide, and the city of Portland, so both sides of the river. We meet quarterly, typically, and so of course once COVID did start, we switched to virtual. So these photos are just prior to that, of course. And we tend each quarter to try to focus the meeting on one general topic and then updates on other topics, so we can kind of focus different meetings for different purposes. I believe that you've seen our annual reports in the past, which do a pretty thorough job of summarizing the work that we do and the input that we provide to port staff and port leadership. We do focus just on the airport, to be clear, so not the other properties, but just PDX. And then, one item we really appreciate each meeting, Dan Pippinger does take some time to walk through updates that are happening at the airport. Even pre-COVID, these are, really important and impactful periods of time where the community can ask questions and hear responses from Dan directly. But especially now with COVID impacts changing a lot of the business, it's especially helpful to have those at each meeting. Next slide, please. We do touch on a number of topics throughout a given year. Some of those are here on the screen. What I would really just applaud the port staff and leadership for is bringing some of these topics to us in the most timely manner. So we do really tackle the most timely topics at each quarterly meeting. And we're also, the way that we work is we have a smaller group as well that's a coordinating committee that we have 2 meetings each around the quarterly meetings. So we discuss upcoming topics. We discuss feedback from the previous meeting in terms of what went well, what feedback we received, if we need to tweak something for the next meeting to be more inclusive of a different topic or to address questions that have come up. So all of these topics we do tend to touch on. So in that regard, we do have a pretty wide variety of topics we discuss. We are focused around the triple bottom line for sustainability. So we do care, very genuinely about a number of topics. One of the key things that CAC members are interested to hear about at each quarterly meeting are some of the inner workings of the airport, which are always fascinating and illuminating. And the group provides input and recommendations back to staff on a number of programs. But it's always very enlightening to hear about, more about the business of the airport. So that's something the CAC members really value. We also tend once a year to have a tour of somewhere in the airport. And so just last month, we had, of course, a virtual tour where port staff were able to go around with the video camera and talk with us. So we could stay in our respective homes, of course, but get a tour virtually of the new work there in Concourse E. So a year ago in 2019, in October, we toured the Concourse E under construction with hard hats and vests. And then this year we got the virtual tour to see progress. So things like that really do help bring along the knowledge base of all the CAC members and input. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we do have about 4 meetings every year, and then quarterly prep meetings and then review meetings as well. This shot again was pre-COVID from last year when the mural was being added with the artist in the photo. So a few of the topics we make sure and really always touch on and give input around include the Natural Resource Program. We always vote to approve funding recommendations for that program, and we hear directly from the applicants and the recipients in that program. We've also added a new PDX access position to more directly make sure that we are thinking of and including travelers with any type of accessibility challenges. I was able, I think last year, to join one of the many kind of walks and rolls around the airport and hear directly from someone next to me the whole time who was sight impaired and someone else who was in a wheelchair. And that really does bring that kind of insight directly onto our group is really valuable. We do participate as a small group and work with port staff to craft agendas to bring topics in a timely manner and touch on as many areas as we can as well. So I think with that, just one more final slide. Looking ahead, we do have a continued challenge to kind of enforce more and more diversity representation on our CAC group. We work with port staff and port leadership to try to identify members of the community who we could bring into our group who can continue to give us a more diverse voice. It's also an opportunity when when a member does rotate off, that's always a great opportunity as well to look to encourage diversity on the CAC. We do intend to discuss more in the meetings ahead, specifically about the PDX master plan and planning and development milestones related to the airport. And then, of course, touch on the COVID-19 projected economic impacts and hear updates each quarter. Seismic resiliency is always a fascinating topic for our group. And the structure of the airport and how that's coming along. and social equity as well is a recurring theme that we plan to continue to spend time on. So I think with that, my very last comment is a genuine thank you from the sponsors of the CAC and all the membership for port staff and port leadership being very transparent, very approachable, very professional. You have quite a range of wonderful staff who are present in the CAC meetings. They engage with our members directly, whether that's on the phone or email and in person when we used to meet in person, but to be available for tough questions and to talk through tough issues. So I just really want to stress, be thankful you've got a great staff at the airport, and we are very appreciative for honest discussion that occurs, and it's a very opinionated group, and we provide a lot of recommendations to staff. So I think with that, I'll wrap up and happy to tackle any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. I'll say again, I appreciate very much your engagement as well as that of your committee. It's important for us to have community response to what we're doing and community engagement there, particularly as we have so many projects at the moment, as you know. To get community input on that is really important. Want to make sure we have time for commissioners to ask questions if there are any. Okay, hearing none, thank you again for your presentation. We appreciate you coming annually to talk to us about your committee.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, commissioners.
Thanks, Dan. Move on to our next item, which is Antoinette Chandler to introduce the first general discussion item.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, Commissioners. Each year, the port is required under our state statutes, the port bond ordinances, and federal guidance related to our grants and PFCs to have audits performed on our books and records. We're here today to present to you the results of our fiscal year 2020 audits. I'm joined today by Bob Burkett, our controller, and also Jim Lazzarota and Ashley Austin, who are partners with Moss Adams. Bob will review the fiscal year 2020 results, and then Moss Adams will present their audit results and required communications. I'd just like to acknowledge and make mention that Moss Adams has performed admirably in this remote environment, given all the challenges with COVID. They're in their 4th year doing the port's external audit, and we certainly appreciate their professionalism and their governmental audit experience and everything that they bring each and every year to our audit engagement. And I'd also like to especially give a thanks to Bob, our controller, and his team for leading the port through this successful audit process. Very challenging, as I'm sure most can imagine, in this COVID and virtual environment. So again, I just want to give a big thank you to Bob and his team. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Well, thank you. All right, next slide, please. All right, good morning. So we're here today to present to you the port's annual audit reports, give you a brief overview of our fiscal 2020 results, and for our external auditors, Moss Adams, to present to you their reports and required communications for the audits that they performed. First, in advance of the meeting, you should have gotten a couple of reports from us. The reports include the port's audited financial statements. It's the report on the port's financial performance for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020. And you should have gotten the port's passenger facility charge report as required by the FAA for airports that impose a PFC. In addition, we provided you copies of the representation letters that we provided to Moss Adams pursuant to their audit work. And you may recall that normally we have a third report on federal awards to share with you. This year, the federal government is a little late on issuing an addendum to an annual compliance supplement that addresses the CARES Act. So the report hasn't been issued yet. We hope the government's going to publish that addendum by the end of the month so we can issue the report soon. But our reporting deadline isn't until the end of the calendar year, so we've got time. So each of these reports serves a different purpose, but all of the reports include the port's basic financial statements, which summarize the results of the fiscal year and the port's financial position as of June 30, 2020. So I'll take a few minutes to briefly review some of the information in the audit reports, and then I'll hand the presentation over to Moss Adams. Next slide, please. So we'll start with some income statement data for PDX, comparing revenues and expenses for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2020 and 2019. As you can see from the bottom line, it was a tougher year for PDX given the rise of the coronavirus pandemic in the latter part of fiscal 2020. So on the first line, operating revenues decreased by about $30 million compared to fiscal 19 due to the impacts of the pandemic, really on all of our passenger dependent revenue streams. As a result of COVID, we ended the year with passenger counts down 27% versus the prior year. So in fiscal 20, we had about 14.6 million passengers as compared to nearly 20 million the year before. The next line, operating expenses excluding depreciation, they were down slightly, coming in about 2 million lower in fiscal 20 due primarily to expense cuts in the last quarter of the year, offset in part by higher PERS rates in fiscal 2020. The next line is simply math, the sum of the two lines above, and then moving down to depreciation expense. We're down about $5 million in fiscal 20 as more assets reach the end of their useful life. At the end of June, most of our large multiple year projects are still in progress. So as those start coming online, we'll start seeing a significant increase in depreciation expense in future years. Down on the non-operating income line, it's up nearly $7 million in fiscal 20 as a result of $27.7 million in CARES funding that we received during the fiscal year. That is offset largely by higher interest expense as a result of the first year of interest on our Series 25 and 2019 bonds. So our bottom line, excuse me, is a positive net income for PDX of $27.6 million in fiscal 20. Which essentially means the airport just broke even for the year on a net income basis without taking CARES funding into account. Next bullet, Steve. So the next table here shows the year-end balances for assets, liabilities, and net position. Net position is just the mathematical difference between assets and liabilities, and it's often called equity in the private sector. You can see that both assets and liabilities increased during the year, but that assets increased more. So that improved PDX's net position by $32.5 million. That net increase is primarily due to net income earned in fiscal 20, which can be attributed again to CARES Act funds received during fiscal 20. Next, Steve. And then this last table at the bottom of the page shows our June 30 balances for unrestricted cash and investments at PDX. Given the challenges we're facing in this environment, liquidity is more important than ever. You can see that our unrestricted cash and investments, which are available for any lawful airport purpose, they increased about $4 million in fiscal 20. Indirectly, that tells us that the impacts of the pandemic would have resulted in a liquidity decrease for the airport without CARES Act funding. If you'd like more information or discussion on our fiscal 20 performance, I'd point you to the management's discussion and analysis on page 3 of the audit reports. It's comprised of about 6 pages of tables and discussion explaining more of the details behind our fiscal 20 results. So next slide. So now we'll move on to some high-level income statement data for the general fund. The general fund is referenced as marine and other in the audit reports that we've given you. You can see on the first line that our fiscal 20 operating revenues decreased versus fiscal 19. This was primarily due to the fact we didn't have any industrial property sales take place in fiscal 20. On the next line, on operating expenses excluding depreciation, we decreased from about 87 million down to about $79 million. Again, largely due to no cost of land sold expense in fiscal 20 since there were no industrial property sales, as well as the fact that there was a one-time project write-off reflected in the higher fiscal 19 expense. These decreases were offset partially by higher Portland Harbor environmental expense accruals in fiscal 2020. So skipping the math line down to depreciation expense, we were relatively flat year over year, primarily just the result of regular asset depreciation with new assets coming online as our old assets roll off or are retired. And on the non-operating income line, we increased by a little over $5 million from the prior year, and that was due primarily to $5 million in matching funds that we received from the State Employer Incentive Fund on a new pension site account deposit. So the net result of all these items was a fiscal 20 net loss of $9.1 million in the general fund. It is worth noting that this is an accrual accounting-based number, which reflects non-cash expenses such as the depreciation as well as long-term environmental accruals. Next. So here we've added the high-level balance sheet information for the general fund, and you can see assets and liabilities both increased slightly during the year, and our total asset balance went up by nearly $7 million more than total liabilities. So we had a small increase in the general fund's net position. That was due primarily to capital grants and some transfers from PDX that fund general aviation capital. And that was offset partially by that net loss on the year that we saw in the table above. Next. And then here at the bottom, we have unrestricted cash and investments for the general fund. You can see that that balance decreased about $30 million from the fiscal 19 balance, and that's the result of placing $30 million with Oregon PERS during the year to create the new pension side accounts that are going to provide us pension rate relief over the next 20 years. Excluding that one-time transaction, the general fund unrestricted cash and investments were essentially flat year over year. Next. So the second report we've given you is the report on passenger facility charges that we generally refer to as PFCs, and that's the $4.50 per ticket charge that is assessed on enplaned passengers, collected by the airlines and then remitted to the airport to be spent on FAA approved projects. So the PFC report starts with the same information contained in the report on audited financial statements. But starting on page 46 of the report, information specific to the PFC program is included, as is Moss Adams' report on compliance and internal control over compliance related to the FAA's PFC program. So in this table, you can see that PDX collected about $6.5 million less in PFCs in fiscal 20 than in fiscal 19 as a result of those lower enplanements during the pandemic. We earned a little less interest income on our PFC balances in fiscal 20 as a result of lower cash balances and lower interest rates. And then you can see that spending was significantly higher in fiscal 20 as fiscal 19 was only for scheduled debt service payments on our PFC revenue bonds, while in fiscal 20 we added in expenditures for Concourse E, the extension there, as well as the apron redevelopment. Next slide. And then, though the report isn't issued yet, here's a quick overview of our report on federal awards. So the slide recaps some of the information in the report regarding our expenditures of federal awards. And you can see our total federal awards increased pretty significantly from 2019 to 2020. The three lines under the details of larger federal awards show the primary areas where the port received federal funding and how much was received under each program. Variances in our capital grant funding are largely a function of the projects that we're undertaking in a given year and their eligibility for funding. And the FAA Airport Improvement Program funds capital improvements at the airport. So you can see we incurred more grant eligible spending in fiscal 20 than in the prior year. We were awarded $72.5 million under the CARES Act, and we drew $27.7 million of that during fiscal 20. And then the last line, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dredging is our reimbursable contract for maintenance dredging of the river channel. While it's not a grant, it's technically considered a federal award for purposes of reporting, and our level of maintenance dredging that we perform in a given year is really dictated by the Corps and depends a lot on what their level of approved federal funding is. Next. So that concludes my review of the audit reports. I'll hand the microphone over to Moss Adams in a moment, but I'll pause here to ask if there are any questions. So you may recall, as Antoinette mentioned, this is our fourth year with Moss Adams under their contract to conduct an independent audit of the port's financial records. Pleased to report that they did an excellent job, again, of performing their audits efficiently, but also coordinating remote auditing, which is no small feat. With us here today to present their reports and required communications are Jim Lanzarota and Ashley Austin, who are both partners in the firm. I'll point out this will be Jim's last audit of the port, as he is planning to retire at the end of this year. However, I hear he has aspirations of perhaps joining the board at the GASB, where he'll still be able to influence our audited financial statements just with accounting guidance now. Jim's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all things governmental accounting, and I've really enjoyed working with him and have appreciated his help over the years. So, Jim and Ashley, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Bob. And if someone could maybe give me a heads up, let me know you're hearing me okay.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Well, thanks for this opportunity. I know you've got a lot on your plate trying to manage both the port activities and the airport activities, especially in these very strange circumstances. So I appreciate your time to allow us to complete the audit process by reporting to you the results. So we want to talk to you about the nature of what we did for the port. Of course, you want to know, what did we find and what does that mean? We'll get into just a few of the details so you know areas that we focused on during our audit. We've issued a written letter to you that has communications that are required by our professional audit standards. And we won't read that to you, but perhaps cover a couple of the highlights. And there are some new accounting standards coming at the port. We'll maybe update you on just a couple things related to that. Next slide, Steve. So when I think of our audit of the port, I can kind of break it into 6 distinct elements. And some of these you're very familiar with, I think. You know, most of us have a pretty good developed concept of an audit of financial statements. It's that independent verification of the dollars that are in those financial statements. And, you know, we're looking at source documents, contracts, invoices, intergovernmental agreements. We're talking to your bank to independently verify, you know, amounts that you have on deposit. So I think you have a pretty good understanding of that element. So that financial statement verification piece is a very important part of it, and where most of our time and effort is. A second element, maybe not as obvious, but also very important to you, is our requirement to look at your internal controls. You know, what are those checks and balances that management uses to make sure that they can put together accurate financials? And, you know, those checks and balances are important. You know, unfortunately, sometimes people have motivations to do things that aren't appropriate, and you want to feel confident that those checks and balances would catch someone who wanted to do something nefarious. But, you know, we're also all human. We make errors. Most of the time when we find errors, they're of the nature of, you know, they're not intentional, but, you know, things happen. And you want confidence that those controls also catch those just human errors. And then we issue a report on our findings of those internal controls. So a second element. A third element, since you are in Oregon, the state of Oregon Audits Division requires auditors to test your compliance with certain state laws. And there's 6 or 7 areas primarily that we focus on, like your budgeting. How well do you go through a public process to enable feedback on your budget? Where you put your cash and investments. There's some pretty strict guidelines on what you're allowed to do with your cash and investments in Treasury. Things like insurance. How do you manage risk at the port? Do you carry commercial insurance? Do you have internal insurance, self-insurance type programs, those sorts of things? Public purchasing. So your procurement. How transparent are you? Are you involving a bid process? And are you meeting some pretty stringent state laws? Those are just a couple areas, and we issue a report, which we'll talk about on that. A fourth element is that you receive, as Bob just mentioned, a pretty significant amount of federal awards. Anytime you receive federal grants, the Office of Management and Budget issues audit guidance for your auditor to do some additional compliance testing. Are you meeting compliance requirements that you agreed to by virtue of accepting those grants? And do you have appropriate internal controls that help you comply? So there's a fourth area. A fifth area for you is also, as Bob mentioned, you get passenger facility charges. And again, there are some added audit requirements of your auditor to look at how you assess, collect, and spend those passenger facility charges, as they have some constraints on their use, primarily to capital projects there at the port. Another element is that you're pretty fortunate that you have staff that can put together your annual financial statement. You know, Bob read a bunch of numbers to you from that document, but that document is a pretty complex thing to put together to meet all of the bells and whistles required by the accounting standards. And a majority of the 1,700 governments in Oregon that file financial reports are unable to have staff on board with the correct experience and knowledge to put that document together with all its bells and whistles. So our job is really just to determine that it is technically correct, the numbers match what we audited, and it has all those bells and whistles required by the accounting standards applicable to governments. And finally is really the reporting, coming to you in reporting the results, which we're doing today. So next slide, Steve. So let's dig into these different elements. And my slide hasn't advanced, so I don't know if you have done that yet. I was noticing, there we go. So what did we find? So in all that audit work of the behind the numbers and disclosures and all the information presented between the covers, we're very pleased to report to you. Well, it looks like you advanced 2 slides. Go back one if you would. There we go. I think maybe my computer's just a little slow. Maybe you're advancing them and I'm not seeing it as quick. I don't know. Anyway, here we go. On the financial statement piece, very pleased to tell you that you achieved what we call an unmodified opinion. So that's our technical jargon. What does that mean? That means that's the best that you can do. I associate that, or we often call it a clean opinion. So basically, we did all this work, we kicked the tires, and we're able to tell you that your financial statements are materially accurate. And in fact, they have all those bells and whistles that I mentioned that are required by the accounting standards applicable to governments. So excellent job. Takes me all of a minute or less to tell you the finding there on what takes your staff all year daily to do, and then my staff and Ashley and all the effort to do the kicking of the tires and determine that. So excellent job. If you would advance the slide, Steve. In terms of those internal controls, we have an obligation to tell you if there are weaknesses. You know, could material errors occur and slip through the cracks and not be identified? And again, we're very pleased to tell you that we did not identify any internal control weaknesses of a level that we need to bring to your attention. So that's excellent. That should give you some comfort, hopefully enables you to sleep a little better at night, knowing that the port has some very good checks and balances. We don't really focus on your internal audit shop, but you, as you know, you have an internal auditor that does projects for you, and you're somewhat unique in that they do look at finance-related controls, and they actually help us with the audit. There's pieces of the audit that they do, and then we go in and test the work that they do, but you actually engage your internal audit shop to help us with some of the pieces of the external audit. And their focus on finance-related controls, at least for part of the work they do in their annual schedule, is somewhat unique. A lot of audit shops are just focused on performance type work, but we appreciate that focus because that's another layer of comfort, I think, that that you can get from the way that your team operates. With relation to those passenger facility charges, again, additional compliance testing required and looking at controls over compliance. And we had no significant weaknesses in any of that or issues that require reporting to you. So good job management of those PFC dollars. Next slide. On the Oregon minimum standards, so these are the state laws that I mentioned. Here we did have 3 findings relative to the management of the budget for the year. So in all the areas that we tested, no compliance findings, except we had 3 over expenditures, which are disclosed in the footnotes to your financial statements. You had a couple minor or small over expenditures. You had one that was relatively large, but seemingly understandable. The largest over expenditure related to capital projects. And I don't know if you want to get into it. I'm not intending to. You might ask some questions, but my understanding is that given all the capital projects that you're doing, sometimes it's difficult to guess how far your contractors are going to get at the end of the year. And I think you got surprised when you did some accrual entries at year end to recognize how much of those projects were completed prior to June 30. And when you accrue the dollars that you owe them, it also hit your budgeted financial statements. And I think you got some surprises there. Had nothing to do really with management of the dollars. All of those capital projects are approved and monitored. Again, maybe Bob or others could get into it if you want, but I suspect you got some surprises at how far contractors got prior to June 30, and the accrual kind of put you over budget for capital outlay. That was the more significant of the 3. Next slide. Now, Bob had mentioned, and this hasn't advanced yet for me, but I think this is one, there we go, on the single audit. So I'll cover this one and then I'll turn it over to Ashley to help me present the rest of this. But on the audit of your federal programs, Bob mentioned that we aren't done yet. So this will be the first year, at least for us, and maybe first year for the port for many years, where the federal grant part of the audit has not been completed at the same time as your financial statement audit. And again, it's because the CARES Act is a major program. It's new to the port, so it's considered high risk in our audit jargon, and it requires us to look at. And unfortunately, the Office of Management and Budget has not issued the guidance that tells us how to audit that. It's also concerning because that compliance supplement addendum that will include this information also tells us certain of the compliance requirements that are applicable to the program. So right now the port is relying, along with our other clients, on frequently asked questions that have been issued by the US Treasury and other sources to kind of find our way around what are the compliance requirements associated with this CARES Act funding. And so that supplement addendum, I think, is due out the end of November, is the best we know. And as soon as it's out, we'll be able to complete our testing of that funding. We did test the Airport Improvement Grant Program, and that work came out fine. We have no reportable findings, no control weaknesses. So at least on that one, we did complete our work, and the port is found to be complying as needed with what's required there, and very good internal controls assisting them with their compliance with that program. And with that, Ashley, would you help me carry on?
That'd be great. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Steve. Let's go one more slide, please. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you about where we focused our time over the course of our field work and some areas of audit emphasis. So as Jim and Bob both mentioned, we do look at your internal controls. I won't read every single control cycle that we look at, but we do kick the tires on all of the various significant key controls in each of the cycles that are listed, focusing largely on revenue, your capital assets, and cash disbursements, of course, as well as financial close and reporting. As Jim mentioned, it takes a lot of effort to get those financial statements rolled up appropriately and correctly and in accordance with GAAP. So we do spend a lot of time making sure you have controls surrounding that financial close and reporting process. As you know, you have a significant amount of management estimates, your environmental remediation liability, any legal contingencies you might have, depreciation. Those are significant to the financial statements. We spend a lot of time talking with various individuals at the port, looking at supporting documentation to verify that those estimates are reasonable and largely consistent with prior years or consistent with information that we've become aware of as a result of our audit procedures. The net pension liability, of course, is a significant obligation at the end of the year, and so we do spend quite a bit of time looking at that. No changes since last year, except the port did establish a side account, a couple of side accounts during 2020, so that was something that we paid attention to this year and verified was appropriately accounted for. You also had some bond activity during the year, so you did some advanced refunding, and then you did an issuance of full Series 26 for fiscal year 20 that we did spend a lot of time confirming, making sure that that was appropriately accounted for, and then you issued Series 27 subsequent to year end, which was disclosed in the financial statements. We also look at capital assets. As Bob and Jim both mentioned, capital assets are a significant balance on the financial statements, so we do test additions, retirements, and depreciation. All of that looked fine and was reasonably appropriate. We also spend quite a bit of time on revenue recognition, looking at your operating revenue streams. We do confirm property tax revenue, investment income, PFC and CFC, as well as looking at federal grants. As you might guess, we did have to adjust a lot of our analytics that we did during the year due to the impact of COVID-19 relative in the fourth quarter of the port's fiscal year. Obviously, we were able to get comfortable with the revenue that was recognized during the year, but we did have to adjust many of our expectations there, as you might expect. We also look at net position consideration of the classification for your unrestricted, your restricted, and your net investment in capital assets. Next slide, please. And then finally, as part of our audit, we do have our information technology individuals come on and take a look at significant controls related to IT. So they look at change management, how can you change anything in your systems, they look at security and access, as well as some of those ITGC's general controls. They do issue a separate letter to management that management is able to respond to. Nothing significant came out of that review this year. As Jim mentioned, we did do the single audit. We audited the airport improvement program, still waiting on the addendum to the compliance supplement, as Jim mentioned. And then a couple of last things on this slide. We do perform an unpredictable procedure each year. It's designed to keep management on our toes and required in accordance with our professional standards. This year we looked at the check register to determine, we summarized by vendor and kind of the number of disbursements that were made between really when everything started locking down in early March till the end of the year, just to determine that controls were still operating appropriately. We picked a few large ones, a few small ones, and that those controls were operating effectively. And finally, the internal audit department does continue to be an integral part of our team. We do meet with them weekly throughout the audit, and really before we kind of kick off the audit with the internal audit department in August, and they start their work in September, later August, and then they continue into September. And they really do help us kick the tires on a lot of the key audit areas that I've just mentioned: capital assets, accounts payable, long-term debt, accounts receivable. We really enjoy working with them and value them as members of our team. Go ahead, next slide, please. And then you can go to the next slide. So this is a slew of slides that documents really our required communications with those charged with governance, which is this commission. It hasn't changed much from last year, but I'll try to highlight the significant items that are relevant to you. So our responsibility under US generally accepted auditing standards, which are our professional standards, as well as government auditing standards, is really just to express our opinion on whether the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with US generally accepted accounting principles. So our audit does not relieve you of your responsibilities or management. We do perform our audit in accordance with our own professional standards and government auditing standards, but we do just design that audit to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. So we're not auditing every dollar. We do look at internal controls over financial reporting more as a basis for determining our audit plan and our audit procedures, not to opine on those internal controls specifically. And then we communicate findings that are in our professional judgment relevant to your oversight of the port. Next slide, please. So this would be our opportunity to talk to you about if there were any changes to the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. We did communicate our plan during the commission officers meeting in May. No change, which is becoming a little bit rare in this environment. A lot of clients have been moving their field work around between when we communicate our plan to those charged with governance and when we come back to deliver the results. Even though we conducted the audit completely remotely, we did not have to adjust our timing. We facilitated the audit just as we had planned to. Next slide, please. So as you know, there's significant accounting policies, unusual transactions. We do look at both of those throughout the year. Management has the responsibility to select appropriate accounting policies. We do look at them every year as part of our audit procedures, part of our review of the financial statements. We do take this time to let you know whether or not the port adopted any new standards. GASB 95 came out and deferred a bunch of dates for various number of standards. So the port did adopt GASB 95, and that was appropriately accounted for in the financial statements. No other significant changes to accounting policies during the current year. And we felt that based on our review and our audit procedures that management had selected and applied those accounting policies appropriately and consistently with last year. Go ahead, next slide, please. And then, as I mentioned, management judgments and accounting estimates are a significant portion of our audit process. We do spend a lot of time there. We look at all the various documentation that I discussed a few slides ago, and we deemed all those significant management estimates reasonable in light of our audit procedures. Next slide, please. We do also like to take a moment to let you know of significant or sensitive financial statement disclosures. Bob pointed you to the MD&A, the Management Discussion and Analysis, which is a really good overview of the financial statements themselves. We are pointing you to several note disclosures here that are, we believe, significant to the financial statements. So if you were to only read just a few notes and the MD&A, we would point you to note 1, which is the summary of significant accounting policies, which I referred to a couple slides back that we review in detail. Long-term debt obviously is a significant footnote, and that's note 6. Note 8, the pension plan and the deferred compensation plan liabilities, that all of the various details for both of those plans are disclosed in note 8. And then note 11, commitments and contingencies, but a sensitive note disclosure, and one that should be paid attention to as well. Next slide, please. This would be our opportunity to let you know if we had any significant difficulties obtaining information from the port, if we had trouble getting access to individuals that we wanted to interview or talk to during our audit process. No significant difficulties, even though we did conduct the audit, as I mentioned, completely remotely. All of Bob and Antoinette's team was great about providing us information, whether that meant that they were required to scan documents, or we screen shared quite a bit with various technologies. So we did not have any significant difficulties during our audit process this year. Next slide. This is also our opportunity to talk about any adjusting journal entries or past journal entries. So an adjusting journal entry is one that we identify that management has to post to their general ledger in order to receive a clean opinion. No adjusting journal entries were identified this year. We also are required to communicate whether there are any past adjustments or proposed adjustments, those that we identify above our findings threshold that management elects to pass on adjusting to their general ledger. Similar to last year, we do have one proposed adjustment to increase land held for sale and net position. This is just related to a difference in methodologies between management and what we believe is GAAP. It will resolve upon when you do the final sale of all those individual tracts, which the main ones are Tripp, Gresham, and Rivergate. We believe overall that that amount is immaterial to the financial statements, but since it rises above our findings threshold, we're required to communicate it here. Next slide, please. As you know, the port's subject to potential legal proceedings. We do work with Dan and his team to confirm with all of the attorneys that you use during the year and verify that any significant items are accounted for appropriately and disclosed in the financial statements. So no items to note here, but do know that we do perform those procedures as part of our audit. Next slide, please. This would be our opportunity to let you know if we had any disagreements with management. This is really getting at if we disagreed on accounting treatment for a specific item, couldn't come to an agreement. None of those items happened this year. Next slide, please. Also, an opportunity to talk to you about any deficiencies in internal control. As Jim mentioned, we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies or non-compliance during our audit procedures. We would be required to include those in our audit reports if we had identified those items specifically related to the financial statements. We also identify just a few best practice recommendations that are mainly communicated throughout the audit process that aren't really relevant to this presentation today. Next slide, please. This slide is really getting at whether or not management consulted with other accountants. So we're not aware of any of these consultations, but what our professional standards require is that if management decided to talk to another accountant about a specific auditing or accounting matter, that accountant or CPA would be required to contact us to determine that they had all the relevant facts and circumstances before providing an opinion. None of those happened this year. Next slide, please. We're required to tell you about any material written communications. So other than the contract, we do a couple of agreed upon procedures engagements, which are still in process. Those engagement letters, as well as the management representation letters for both the financial statements and the PFC. Other than those items, no other significant communications have been between management and us as the auditors. Next slide, please. And as part of our audit, we do look at whether management and the port can continue as a going concern. Obviously, this would not be the first time if we were concerned, but we are required to communicate that no such matters came to our attention. Next slide, please. And then finally, I think this is my last slide, but we were not aware of any instances of fraud or non-compliance. As you know, we are required to perform several procedures around the consideration of fraud. We do interview quite a few people throughout the organization. We perform our surprise procedure. We look at journal entries, and we do various other items related to determining and making this determination that we were not aware of any instances of fraud. Next slide, please. Yes, and now I'm going to hand it back to Jim to go through a couple of quick items.
Thanks, Ashley. I know we're going kind of fast, and we'll want to pause here in just a minute, make sure that you have an opportunity to ask any questions too. But very briefly, I know Ashley mentioned already that the port took advantage of a gift that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board provided in GASB 95 that deferred the effective date of many standards. There's about 7 or 8 standards that we've talked to you about in the past that the port will be facing implementing. A very important one is one on leases, a different way of accounting for your lease agreements, both as lessee and very important to you as lessor. And we got a gift. We've got an additional year to implement these 7 or 8 standards, which the port and pretty much all our clients are taking advantage of. Next slide, if you would, Steve. And there are a couple that have been issued, which we haven't talked to you about. One is dealing with all of these software, IT, and infrastructure and software arrangements in the cloud. And how do you account for that? A lot of questions over many years now about how to effectively account for expenditures when you're utilizing these cloud-based services. Finally, we've got some guidance to follow there. And a standard came out about these deferred comp, IRC section 457 deferred comp plans. There was, when I started my career, if you had a deferred comp plan, the assets that were within them was reflected as an asset on your balance sheet and a liability, because of course you're holding it on behalf of your employees. Then changes came to through the IRS where those were protected from claims against general creditors. And so those assets and liabilities came out of the books if you took advantage of those protections. Now there's an opportunity for them to come right back in the books. And this provides the guidance on what criteria would require these plans to come back into your financial statements, which primarily has to do with whether you have a separate board or not, and who's responsible for managing the assets and those sorts of things. So 2 new ones to evaluate going forward, and another year to implement the 7 or 8 that are already out there. Next slide. I think those is mostly what we want to talk about. I wanted to make just 2 quick comments and then open this up for any questions you may have been accumulating, but wanted to give a shout out real quick to Antoinette, obviously fairly new to the port, and we're just getting to know her. And one thing that struck me anyway is how anxious and interested she was to get involved in the audit process. So she got to, or I shouldn't say she got to, she took the time to get involved in some of the meetings that we had, status updates, those sorts of things. So we're kind of getting a sense of Antoinette, and very positive feelings and about that. Looks like a really good addition to the port. So hats off to Antoinette, and appreciate our interactions with her. One other shout out too, Ashley mentioned very briefly that the port took advantage of an additional contribution to PERS. You might remember that the port put in an additional $30 million, took advantage of some legislative initiatives here in Oregon that enabled side account deposits, and you actually got a $5 million match. So you got almost an immediate 16% plus return on that contribution. But I want to give a shout out to Bob Burkett, the port's controller. Bob took time to go to Salem and provide some feedback and some input, which enabled some additional flexibility on how those side account contributions could be utilized in the future to offset your contributions, really providing some leadership on behalf of other entities that also took advantage of the opportunity to make those additional contributions. And I bring it up because we're very fortunate. We get to work with individuals like Bob that are willing to take time and provide leadership to their fellow finance officers and local governments, and just hope that his efforts are acknowledged. We certainly appreciate him, and our other clients certainly appreciate that level of effort and leadership that he provided there. And with that, I sure want to open it up for any questions that you may have. I know we went kind of fast. Feels like we go fast in these.
Thanks, Jim and Ashley, for the presentations. I want to also thank the, Antoinette's team, Bob, as well as the internal audit team who helped so much put this audit together. You said, Jim, this feels like you go quickly through a lot of material that it took both the staff and then your shop a long time to get right, and we appreciate that. I will definitely sleep better knowing that we had a clean opinion and no findings of material weaknesses on internal controls, particularly in a year when we've had some leadership changes, as well as just the pandemic and how it's changed how we all work. To know that that's not affecting our controls is important, I think. I wanted to ask Bob if he wanted to provide any additional color on the over expenditure issue, or if you felt like that was well represented in the presentation.
I think it was pretty well represented. It really came down to the fact that with accrual-based accounting, we're bringing expenses onto the books after the deadline to make any changes to the budget have passed. And in this case, the estimates that were used to change the budget appropriations were more aligned around cash flows as opposed to accrual-based accounting expenses. So there was a little bit of a mismatch there. There were no budget overruns on any projects. This really was one of the difficulties we face between local budget law and full accrual-based accounting.
Got it. Thank you. Want to open the floor to the other commissioners if there are any questions or comments here.
No questions from me, but I would just like to say stellar job. I always appreciate the in-depth analysis and the professionalism that the port brings to this and that Moss Adams certifies. So thank you very much.
This is Mike. Quick question, but let me also offer my thanks to all of the parties in this work, and particularly delighted to hear that Antoinette was excited about getting involved in an audit. It's not always with my experience working with boards. You mentioned that there is some additional guidance that is expected regarding audit procedures relative to the CARES Act. Is that likely to focus on each of our lines of business? I mean, is that guidance going to be unique for each of the streams, or do we think that we're going to be able to continue to follow largely a singular path for the audit, if my question makes sense?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, and I don't know if I fully understand it, but the guidance will come out. There are several CARES Act programs that will be singled out individually. They attach to them so we can tell them apart. But the port obtains proceeds from one particular CARES Act program. This guidance will lay out what are the compliance requirements. Is there eligibility? The use, what are eligible expenditures or the types of uses of those CARES Act dollars? Reporting would be required, and then it will to the auditor, what are some of the audit requirements? What should we be looking at in terms of testing to determine if the port complied? And there is, so obviously that's out, that the port has used to try to determine where to spend the dollars. What costs are they considering covered by those CARES Act, that program? As I mentioned, frequently asked questions, the Treasury put out. So there is guidance. It's not that there's lack of it, but there is a lack of that final document that auditors rely on in terms of how to test those programs. When you mention lines of businesses, I think the only overlay is where the port applied the dollars. That could impact different lines of businesses, but we'll be testing that as one program and according to that supplement addendum when it comes out.
Right.
I don't know if that
Thank you.
completely gets there. Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, hearing none,
I'd like to add my thanks as well to both the port for the discipline and the continuous diligence. And thank you to Moss Adams for an excellent and succinct report out.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Vice President, thank you, Antoinette, and the team for doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, commissioners, and thank you again to Moss Adams and to the finance team for the presentations today. Appreciate all of the work that went into it. We will move forward with our agenda, which is, I will call on Keith Levitt to introduce the first agenda item, please.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning, everyone. This agenda item would allow the port to enter into a master development agreement with the team of Specht and Colas at Gresham Vista Lot 5. This is a project that is long in the making. We've been working on this for a better part of a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and it really is an inflection point for our properties and our economic development work. You know, the port's historic role in industrial real estate has been to develop very large parks, very large sites, and create shovel-ready sites that the private market can then bring to fruition. We've really pivoted our strategy over the last few years to be much more focused on the end economic development result from that work. And this really is the first, I'd say, tangible, important project moving in that direction of creating partnerships around quality jobs, creating partnerships within the community, with the public and private sector, in this case, City of Gresham, and with our development team of Specht and Colas, to really go out and try to provide economic uplift in the community with the types of jobs and economic activity for populations that need it the most. So this is really a big moment for our properties team. Kudos to Joe and the team for getting us to this point. The framework of the Master Development Agreement is a common framework. I know it might look a little bit complex when you read the agenda item. It's really just a set of options that the developer can exercise if certain strategic goals are met, and it allows us to leverage the private expertise in marketing with the port's work and the city's work in also marketing to bring the right jobs and the right strategies into play. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Molesky, who is our Senior Manager of Real Estate and Economic Development, to present the item.
Thank you, Keith. Good morning. Next slide, please. This agenda item requests approval to enter into a master development agreement with GB5 LLC. I will describe the port's diversity, equity, and inclusion goals and how this MDA is a key initiative in implementing our DEI strategy. I will provide background on the Gresham Vista Business Park and the subject property, Gresham Vista Lot 5. I will summarize how we selected our master developer, the Specht Development and Colas Development Group team. They formed a limited liability company, GB5 LLC, that is our partner in the MDA. Both are participating here today, and you will have an opportunity to hear from them later. I will present the MDA terms, including conceptual site plan, form ground lease, and sale agreement terms, as well as a marketing plan. This is a complicated agreement, so feel free to ask questions at any time, and we'll have time for questions at the end of my presentation. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the port's DEI framework in reshaping our business development and properties industrial vision to embrace DEI. It does not capture the extent of the port's commitment and organizational effort to incorporate social equity into the way we conduct business. The port's commission policy on social equity and our strategic plan define DEI goals, and Curtis, Keith, and the executive team have challenged us to create a more equitable and prosperous region. The port has used its assets to drive economic activity and prosperity. World-class airport, general aviation airports, efficient marine terminals, quality business parks, a talented port workforce providing essential business services are all key aspects of a healthy regional economy. But these port assets have not created prosperity for all. So we changed our industrial vision from focusing in on land sale and lease revenue, investment, number of jobs, growing the tax base. These are all still very important, but we have pivoted to focusing in on providing quality job opportunities for all in our communities. Next slide, please. To pursue quality jobs, we first had to define it with these criteria. Quality wages, meeting or exceeding the state average wage, which is currently $53,890 per year. That is $25.90 per hour and is a high target for all employees. Competitive benefits like healthcare, childcare, insurance, retirement savings. Low barriers to entry. Many jobs have high qualification requirements in education or specific training that then exclude most candidates. Career ladder opportunities. We seek economic mobility for all to advance within the company and the industry. Workforce support like training and education. A diverse and inclusive workplace embracing social equity. Of these criteria, wages are primary, and our goal is to meet 3 of 6 criteria. We have done research on what types of employers meet the wage criteria, and it is mostly manufacturers and professional services companies. We will screen all future tenants against the quality job criteria and create equity profiles to evaluate prospects. Some of this information, such as wages and demographics, is sensitive and may be difficult to obtain and evaluate. At Gresham Vista Lot 5 and other port properties, we seek to attract quality employers and need the help of Spec Colas and our partners to meet this DEI goal. Next slide, please. Here is the master plan for the Gresham Vista Business Park. The city of Gresham invited us to acquire this 221-acre property from LSI Corporation in 2011 and has been a great partner ever since. On Semiconductor operates an advanced automated wafer fabrication plant on 83 acres shown here in the middle of and adjacent to Gresham Vista. We have developed several of the Gresham Vista parcels, including Gresham Vista Lot 9 as Vista Logistics Park. It was developed by Spec Development as a quality speculative project with 3 buildings totaled 733,000 square feet with multiple tenants. Gresham Vista Lot 5 covers 48 acres and is the port's largest development-ready parcel. We seek to have a manufacturing-focused business park at Gresham Vista Lot 5 and have several manufacturers nearby in Gresham, including Element 6, which makes synthetic diamonds for Lightbox on Gresham Vista Lot 7, On Semiconductor, Imperial Brown, Eclair Farms, Boeing, and Microchip. Next slide, please. This is an aerial photo of Gresham Vista Lot 5 looking north. It is located along Northeast 242nd Drive. Adjacent property uses include the Subaru Master Parts Distribution Center and On Semiconductor plant. Gresham Vista Lot 5 includes a shared access driveway with Subaru on the adjacent Gresham Vista Lot 4. A new traffic signal was installed as part of the Subaru development and controls access to 242nd Drive. Also note that Gresham Vista Lot 5 has adjacent residential use to both the south and the east, and that we have Gresham Vista development standards that ensure our business park tenants will be good neighbors. Next slide, please. The port issued a request for qualifications to competitively select a master developer for marketing and development services to meet our DEI goals at Gresham Vista Lot 5. The comprehensive evaluation criteria is listed here. The port selected Spec Development and Colas Development Group team as the most qualified master development team. Next slide, please. This organizational chart shows the master development team. The team is co-led by Spec Development, an experienced local developer with over 11 million square feet of commercial and industrial real estate projects, and co-developer Colas Development Group, a local family-owned construction and development company and a certified minority business enterprise, which provides construction services in civic, K-12, higher education, industrial and mixed use, affordable housing, and tenant improvements. Colas will also provide construction services at Gresham Vista Lot 5. The development team also includes Perlo Construction as a construction contractor and McKenzie as the architect engineer. Both have extensive industrial experience with quality projects at port business parks, including Gresham Vista. Jones Lang LaSalle is the real estate broker with local, national, and international brokerage and tenant representation services. All team member companies believe in a diverse and inclusive culture and have individuals who will be great partners with the port for pursuing our DEI goals. Next slide, please. This is an example of conceptual site plan with multiple sizes of manufacturing build-to-suit tenants. The actual development may look very different depending on the site and building requirements of specific future tenants. Gresham Vista Lot 5 can accommodate multiple manufacturers as long as the remaining parcels are developable and marketable. GV5 LLC is responsible for all land use actions to create new lots, design, permitting, and construction of all new facilities. Some future tenants may share road and utility access, and these infrastructure costs will be shared with the benefited parcels, with the port covering the capital costs of the vacant benefited parcels. As an example, if we had a tenant for Building 8 in the top left here, requiring extension of driveway and utilities to Point G in the center, it would benefit all the other lots. The shared infrastructure costs will be allocated proportionally on a benefited acreage basis. Next slide, please. The Master Development Agreement is an option agreement with marketing and development obligations and was structured to be flexible to meet future tenant requirements. The port has a preference for leasing, but allows sales as some manufacturers view their manufacturing operations as mission critical that they must own, like Element 6. The Master Development Agreement includes both a form ground lease and a form purchase and sale agreement to accommodate either. MDA terms include exclusive property rights for an initial term of 3 years and 2 extension term options for 1 year each. The purchase price or lease structure would be based on a fair market value of $8 per square foot during the first 2 years of the initial term, and after fair market value adjustments during year 3 and the extension terms. If a lease, the term is 55 years with rent based on an 8% annual lease rate or participating building rent as a percent of the land value to the total development investment. Option fees for the initial term are $300,000 and are applicable to the transactions on an accelerated prorated basis and refundable under certain conditions. The extension fee is $150,000 per year, which are both applicable and refundable under certain conditions. As discussed on the site plan, there may be shared infrastructure costs that are proportionally allocated for phased development, with a port cap of $3 million. Port capital will be recouped on future transactions and added to fair market value on benefited and now improved parcels. We have also established a minority women small business enterprise participation goal of 20% for all subcontracting. Next slide, please. The Master Development Agreement includes an approved marketing plan that can be updated over time. Jones Lang LaSalle is the GV5 LLC real estate broker and will partner with the port on marketing and recruiting quality employers. JLL will evaluate the market and the competition and identify the most effective marketing channels. JLL will tap into its local, national, and international pipeline to identify tenant prospects. Targets include companies in advanced manufacturing, such as microelectronics, medical devices, aviation and automotive electronics, computer and electronic product manufacturing, equipment and machinery manufacturing, and food processors. Marketing and economic development activities will be coordinated by the Spec Colas and JLL teams with the port marketing team, as well as the City of Gresham and our regional economic development partners. GV5 LLC will formally submit tenant prospects that qualify as quality employers for port approval prior to the property lease or sale. Next slide. Port staff requests approval of the Executive Director's recommendation for the port to enter into a Master Development Agreement with GV5 LLC. I would like now to introduce 2 of our partners, Greg Speck, Chief Executive Officer of Speck Development, and Andrew Colas, President of Colas Construction, and provide an opportunity to address the Port Commission prior to any questions on the Gresham Vista Lot 5 Master Development Agreement.
Thank you, Joe. This is Greg Speck. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Thank you for the introduction. Madam President, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk about the opportunity at Gresham Vista Lot 5. I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking Keith, Joe, and Nathan Orff for spending a fair amount of time over the last 18 months to get us to where we are today. I mean, we look at this as a great piece of real estate. We look at this as a great opportunity to achieve a variety of social purposes, and it's been a long time coming. And we're excited to be here, partnering with the Colas Group, with the City of Gresham, with the Port of Portland, and our expanded team to achieve success here. It's a high bar. The quality jobs will not be easy to obtain, but we're willing to make a substantial bet that we will find success.
And good morning, I'm Andrew Colas. I'd like to thank, first of all, thank everybody for your time this morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Director, and then to the point that Greg made earlier, want to thank the team from the port that's helped us get to this point. Joe Molesky, Keith Levitt, it's been a lot of work up to this point, and I really feel like, based on all of our initial interactions, it's wonderful partnership, and we're really excited to play part in this very unique development opportunity. And we look forward to bringing our value system to this project. We truly believe that this can become a model for future developments, specifically as they pertain to public-private partnerships. So we look forward to the continued partnership with your leadership team and to the people that are doing the work every day. We're very thrilled. So it's been wonderful partnering with SPEC. Greg is a very concise person, and when it comes down to conversations that I have, he shares everything. So the amount of meetings and lunches and opportunities I've just had to learn from him have been just a really good experience, and he shares that with the rest of our project team. So I see this as a true partnership. So thanks again. And again, we appreciate you having gone through this full board meeting. I got to listen in. You all are doing a lot of work. That audit was fun to listen through. So again, we appreciate all the work that you do every day.
Great. Thank you, Andrew and Greg. Are there any questions for any of the team?
Thank you. I'll just start. I assume that we're going to use the permitting process for construction to obtain any sort of community feedback as we move forward on this project. I just want to make sure that that's the case, that the community will have an opportunity beyond this meeting to give you feedback on how and what we do out there.
Absolutely. We will use not only the permitting process, but our relationship with the city and the community to communicate on planned development projects prior to they get to construction.
Great, thank you. I want to open the floor to other commissioners, please. Commissioner Taruda, I don't think we can hear you. Your voice is getting garbled on the phone. No, thank you. We can't hear you.
Sounds like the chipmunks Christmas.
Yeah, maybe if someone else has a comment, well, maybe Commissioner Saruda can call in on his phone. No, it's not working.
Madam President, this is Pat McDonald, and I wanted to acknowledge this very exciting project and the work that has been done to get to this point of an MDA. I think this is absolutely the path of the future, and I hope we endeavor to do more of these projects.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Madam President, this is Mike. I want to echo Commissioner McDonald's comments and say that this is very exciting. In some ways, we are establishing a framework for best practice, but we also have the added advantage of bringing best practitioners to this work. And that's been demonstrated. And we're very excited about not only the master development agreement, but the concentric circles of community engagement and working with other subcontractors. I just think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to do something that will really provide some structure, guidance, and vision to the broader social equity agenda of the port. So I'm very excited about it and commend our partners going forward for their commitment to help us sort of blaze this new path. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? And I want to make sure I've given Commissioner Saruta an opportunity to speak if we can figure out the technology. Sorry, Commissioner, we're still not able to understand you.
Madam President, if I may, perhaps Commissioner Saruta could use the chat box, if that's available.
I'm not sure if it's closed, if the chat box is closed. If it isn't, I will read his testimony so that we can make sure to get it on the record. Pam, do you know? No, we still can't hear you, Commissioner.
No, the chat box is available.
All right, Commissioner Saruta, if you'd like to type something into the chat box while we have a further discussion here, we'll be able to read it into the record for you.
While we're doing that, this is Commissioner Nemi. Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to say I really recognize and appreciate the economic benchmarks of creating what I would consider good jobs as being a part of this, and some of those other criteria that are there. I'm really glad to see that.
Yes, I agree with that, Commissioner. I think, you know, the how we are defining the jobs that are out there is important, particularly as we think about where the port has impacted communities with our operations in the past, and where we could impact in a beneficial way our communities in the future. Absolutely.
I'd just like to add in, I'm very encouraged to see the port with Keith's leadership on this project effort and the DEI goals for the community, and I really encourage and appreciate that.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything from Commissioner Saruta on the chat yet, but I will go ahead and ask for a motion and second to approve the Executive Director's recommendation.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Pam. Would you lead us through the roll call vote, please?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Pierce,
Aye.
and Saruta. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
I will now call on Dan Pippinger to introduce our last agenda item.
Good morning again, Madam President and Commissioners. Thank you. This item is to request approval of a public improvement project for capital investment in the Terminal 6 stormwater system. The project is really designed to improve the filtration and handling of stormwater at Terminal 6, as well as repairing some aging infrastructure and piping. Janelle Brannon, project engineer from our engineering department, will present the project. Janelle?
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today, I am requesting approval of the public improvement contract to CatWorks LLC in the amount of just over $4 million for the Basin K and L Stormwater Treatment Improvement Project. Next slide, please. This stormwater improvement project will provide the required treatment of pollutants found in the stormwater runoff from Basin K and Basin L. With this project, the stormwater runoff will be intercepted prior to the basin outfalls and pumped to the bioretention facility. Once at the bioretention facility, the pollutants will be removed from the stormwater by filtration through the vegetation and soil media. The stormwater will then infiltrate into the ground. During larger rain events, an overflow has been designed to allow the stormwater to enter the piped stormwater system. In addition to the stormwater improvements, this project has also incorporated replacement of a section of sanitary sewer pipe. Next slide, please. This project includes 2 pump stations, nearly 5,000 feet of forced main pipe, 800 feet of stormwater overflow pipe for the large rainfall events, and the 24,000 square foot bioretention facility. The bioretention facility will be planted with a mix of native plants and grasses that will thrive in this facility. A temporary irrigation system will be installed for the plant establishment period. Also, the 200 feet of damaged sanitary sewer pipe will be removed and replaced. Next slide, please. The design of this project was completed in September, and with today's approval of the public improvement contract, construction will occur from late December 2020 through fall of 2021. Next slide, please. The total budget for this project is just over $5.8 million. The funding source for this project is the General Fund Cost Center. The public improvement contract for approval today is just over $4 million. The contingency is 7% of the project budget. This is reasonable given the risk profile and scope of work for this project. The small business goal was set at 10%. We are very pleased that the responsive low bidder CatWorks LLC has committed to a goal of 75% SBE participation. CatWorks LLC is a DBE certified in Oregon and will be self-performing to achieve the 75% SBE participation. Next slide, please. Staff request approval of these executive directors' recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very straightforward. Does anyone have any questions?
Madam President, I'm delighted to see the small business set aside. And I guess I would just try to understand, given the high percentage that they will meet, I guess I'm trying to figure out why they were not viewed as the primary contractor as opposed to the person providing the small business set aside. I hope that's not a twisted question, but it would seem that this would be a scenario where we are essentially contracting with a disadvantaged business as our primary contractor, and it rises above the set-aside considerations as I think about them.
When you were asking the question, you were breaking up a little bit, and I don't think I understood your question.
Okay, I guess the award is being given to a concern that does qualify as a small business enterprise, and they will be meeting that 10% requirement well in excess of. I guess I'm trying to determine whether this is better characterized as a contract being awarded to a company that is an SBM, but they are essentially our primary. We're not selecting them on the basis of being a small business enterprise. We're selecting them on the basis of being the preferred provider.
Yes, so they were the responsive low bid, and they were able to meet our SBE goals. If that answers
I understand. I guess it's a missed opportunity to elevate a contractor who might otherwise be relegated to the position of SBM contributor, who are essentially our primary selector. That's all.
Commissioner Dan Pippinger here. I think I understand your point. I actually think we'll get together with our small business team and try to answer your question with a little more detail and kind of address what you're bringing up. I think Janelle as description as they're the preferred one, so they're going to meet the target. But I guess I'm still working to understand exactly the comment.
Dan and Janelle, it's Curtis. Are they the prime?
Yes.
And so it's not that so the target is far surpassed, right? We are
correct.
They won the bid.
Yes.
All right, I'm fine. I'm fine. I think there's always an opportunity for us to acknowledge the movement and the growth of concerns who are covered under our initial SBM outreaches to elevate themselves up into a higher profile in terms of business partners. And so I'm just hoping this isn't a missed opportunity to acknowledge that that has in fact happened in this case.
I understand your point, and I think it's a great story, but I'm not sure if we've done work with them before or not. I don't know, Janelle, if you can comment on that, but if not, we can get that kind of information.
We can circle back around and get that information.
Great.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you lead us through the roll call vote, please?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Pierce,
Aye.
and Saruda. Great, thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Well, thank you, everyone, and I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you for your participation, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.